12 men come back out of Canaan with a report, and one line of it is a problem. We saw the Nephilim there. That is the book of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 33. The scouts Moses sent north come back and describe who is living there, and the word they reach for is the word from before the water. Which is the trouble. Genesis has already drowned them. Every living thing wiped off the face of the ground. 8 people in a boat. And in the reading most of us grew up with, those creatures are why the water came at all. So the giants came back, and nobody in the text stops to explain it. The page says it. The page does not defend it. None of this needs you to believe it. Faith does not come into the problem. It is 2 books of the same Bible saying things that do not fit, in a copy that is probably in the house already. And it is nobody's mistake. The sentence sits in the earliest Hebrew text anybody has. It sits in the Greek that Jewish scholars in Alexandria made 2 centuries before Christ. It has been in English since English had a Bible. There are 3 of these sightings, not 1, and all 3 go in front of you before anybody gets a theory. Then the answers. 1 is 4 words long, sitting in Genesis chapter 6. In a verse you have already read, and it was put there before the flood even started. The other is a family tree, and it is duller than you want it to be, and stronger than you expect. But the report is not where this starts. It starts with the water, and with how absolute the book is about it. Genesis chapter 6, verse 17. Behold, I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life, and everything that is in the earth shall die. Then, chapter 7 says the same thing 3 times in 3 verses, the way a man repeats himself when he wants no argument about it afterwards. Every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. Count the survivors, because the text counts them for you. Noah, his wife, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the wife of each of the 3. 8 people and 1 door. The writer lists them twice in the same chapter, so that nobody can quietly add a 9th later. Now look at what sits immediately before that verdict, because this is why the giants are in the story at all. 4 verses. The sons of God see that the daughters of men are fair. They take wives of all which they choose. Children are born. And the next thing that happens in the chapter is God looking at the earth and deciding to wipe off what he made. Whatever those 4 verses are describing, the flood is the answer to it. That is the rule, and Genesis teaches it hard before it breaks it. Total. No exceptions. Nothing outside the boat. Keep it, because in the 2nd year out of Egypt, 12 men walk into Canaan with instructions to count the population. Sighting 1. Kadesh, in the desert south of the land. Moses picks 1 man from each tribe and sends them north for 40 days. They come back carrying fruit, a single cluster of grapes off a valley called Eshcol, slung on a pole between 2 of them because 1 man could not lift it. Pomegranates and figs as well. It is a good land, they say. It flows with milk and honey, and here is the produce. Then the rest of the report. They had been to Hebron, and Hebron is where the trouble was. The text gives the names of 3 men living there. Ahiman, Sheshai, Talmai, the children of Anak, it says, and it adds the kind of detail somebody puts in when a report is meant to be believed. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And then the line. We saw the Nephilim there, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Picture the room it lands in. A camp at the end of 40 days. A crowd that has been waiting the whole time. Fruit on the ground as proof the country is worth having. And 10 of the 12 standing there telling everybody the country cannot be taken. 2 are arguing the other way and getting nowhere. And one of those 2 is a man called Joshua, who comes back into this later with an army. That is the room the word Nephilim is spoken into, and the whole nation turns on it. Now, the honest problem with that verse, and it is a real one, and I am not going to walk past it on the way to the interesting part. The verse before it calls this an evil report. That is the narrator's own word for what the 10 scouts brought back, and the generation that believed them dies in the desert for it. So the one sentence in the whole Hebrew Bible that puts Nephilim after the flood is sitting inside a report the book has just labeled a bad one. If you want to throw the case out on that basis, you can, and you would be in respectable company. Except the word does not stay inside the bad report. Sighting 2 is not frightened men talking. It is Moses narrating in a passage about somebody else's history entirely. Deuteronomy chapter 2. Israel is walking around the edge of Moab, and the text stops to tell you who used to live there. The Emim, a people great and many, and tall as the Anakim, which also were accounted Rephaim as the Anakim, but the Moabites call them Emim. Read that slowly, because it is doing 2 things at once. Rephaim is the general word, the category. Emim is what the Moabites called the particular lot who lived next door to them. 10 verses later, the chapter does it again for Ammon, another vanished nation in another territory, tall the same way, filed under the same category, and this time the local name is Zamzummim. 2 nations, 2 sets of neighbors who never compared notes. Both of them used the same category and then supplied a name of their own for it, which is what people do when they are naming something they believe was actually there. And notice what the chapter is for. It is a land registry, explaining who held which territory before the current occupants, and it hands out the giant clans like deeds. Nobody is trying to impress you here, and that is what gives the passage its weight. Sighting 3 has a measurement on it. Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 11. Only Og king of Bashan remained of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length of it, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. 9 cubits by 4 is roughly 13 feet by 6, 4 meters of bed. But the phrase to hold is the last one, after the cubit of a man. The writer has stopped mid-sentence to say which cubit he means, because there was more than one in use. That clause is there to stop the number drifting. Whether the number is true is a separate matter, and the clause cannot settle it. The other half of the verse is the address. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? Present tense, a named city in a neighboring kingdom, on the day the sentence was written. That is a writer pointing at an object and expecting his reader to be able to look at it. Nobody has ever found it. What is still standing is the country. Bashan is the basalt plateau east of the Sea of Galilee, and that plateau is covered in dolmens. Slabs of black rock stood on end with another laid flat across the top. Doorways with nowhere to go, and there are thousands of them. They were tombs, older than Israel and older than the conquest narratives, and nobody has established who built them. I have to be careful here, because this is the kind of fact this material gets abused with. Those stones are in Og's territory. They are not evidence of Og. Geography is not identification, and anybody who tells you otherwise is doing something to you. The plateau was already full of house-sized graves, while Deuteronomy was describing it. In a country the Hebrew Bible elsewhere makes a byword for size, for its cattle and its oaks. Make of that what you like. I am handing you the stones, not a conclusion. 3 sightings, a report the book itself distrusts, a land registry that does not care whether you are impressed, and an object with its dimensions written down, in a country full of stone doors. And the last of them names the last one. Og is called the remnant, the end of a line, which is where it should stop, and it does not. Joshua clears the Anakim out of the hill country. Chapter 11 says he cut them off from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, from all the mountains of Judah and Israel. Region by region, nothing left. It is written the way the flood was written, as a total job. And then the next sentence does the thing this whole episode is about. There was none of the Anakim left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod there remained. 3 towns. Somebody kept the list. The middle one is where this goes next. 500 years later, a man walks out of Gath, down a valley, to shout at an army. That story you already know, and it is not what I want you to look at. Look at the paragraph nobody quotes. 2nd Book of Samuel, chapter 21. 4 more Philistine champions, listed by name, and all 4 called sons of the Rapha in Gath. One of them has 6 fingers on each hand, and 6 toes on each foot. 24 in number, says the text, and it says nothing else about him at all. The most famous duel in the Bible turns out to be one entry on a list the book files without comment. Now the honest caveat, because this is the exact seam where this subject gets oversold. The Bible never joins those 2 sentences up. It says the Anakim were left in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. It says these men were born to the Rapha in Gath. It puts both facts down and never once claims a descent between them. That is a coincidence of place and vocabulary, and I would rather hand you a coincidence than a bloodline I invented on the way. And since this channel does not get to skip the inconvenient part, even the champion's height is disputed inside the manuscript record. The Hebrew text most Bibles come from gives 6 cubits and a span, which is over 9 feet. The copy of Samuel, found in the caves at Qumran, gives 4 cubits and a span, and so does the Old Greek. That is about 6'9", frightening in the Bronze Age, and a completely different order of claim, and which one came first has been unsettled since the scrolls came out of the ground. So where did any of them come from? Here is the answer, that is 4 words long. Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. The verse everybody has read and nobody has slowed down over. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Read it again, and stop in the middle. And also after that. 4 words in English, 2 or 3 in the Hebrew, depending on how you count a small mark the scribes put between them. Either way, it is the shortest thing in this episode, and it is the only line in the Torah that admits the problem before the problem arrives. It is not the whole answer, it is the permission. The 4 words are what makes the rest of this legal, and the rest of this is where the strange part lives. Because the verse did not need the clause. In those days already told you when. It adds a second window, and it adds it in the middle of the sentence that introduces these creatures, inside the same short passage that ends with God deciding to wipe the earth. There are two ways to take it, and I will give you both. The first is the modest one. After that means after the sons of God started coming down, not after the water. A second wave inside the same era, before the flood, and the clause is doing nothing more than telling you the arrangement lasted a while. The second is the one the conquest narratives keep making you consider. After that means after that. On this reading, the writer knows his readers are going to meet these people again in Canaan 40 chapters further on, and he has put a note in early so that nobody thinks the book lost track of its own arithmetic. Michael Heiser, in Reversing Herman, argues the second one. His case is that the clause is unnecessary on any other reading, and Hebrew narrative does not scatter unnecessary clauses through its opening chapters. Nobody can prove that. It is a reading of 4 words, and 4 words will carry either weight you put on them. What can be shown is where the clause is. It is in the Masoretic text, which is the standard Hebrew. It is in the Samaritan Pentateuch, kept by a community that broke with the rest of Judaism centuries before Christ and has agreed with them about almost nothing since. It is in the Septuagint. 3 traditions with every reason to differ, all 3 carrying the same 4 words in the same place. Nobody put those words in, and nobody could get them out. My name is Thomas, and what I keep in this vault are the books the Bible names out loud and then does not print. If giants, watchers, and the texts that fill the holes in Genesis are what you came for, make sure to subscribe to Vault of the Fallen. So, what the 4 words let through. The clause opens a door. The next question is, what walked through it? And the record gives 2 answers that are almost embarrassingly different from each other. The other answer is a family tree, and I want to give it properly, because it is the one most scholars hold, and the one this channel would be dishonest to skip. The Anakim have a genealogy in the text. Joshua gives it in 2 places. Abba was a great man among the Anakim, and the town of Hebron was called Kiriath Arba before Israel renamed it, which is to say the city was named after him. Abba is the father of Anak. Anak is the father of the 3 men the scouts met, Ahiman, Sheshai, Talmai. That is a founder, a town named after him, a son and 3 grandsons. It is the shape of every other clan in the conquest narratives, and there is nothing supernatural anywhere in it. On this reading, the sentence in Numbers is a comparison and not a pedigree. 10 terrified men look up at a fortified hill town full of unusually large people and reach for the biggest word their culture owns. We saw the Nephilim. It is what the frightened have always done, and the narrator's word for the report supports it. And there is a wrinkle in the vocabulary that cuts the same way. Rephaim, the word Deuteronomy files these clans under, does another job elsewhere in the Bible. In the poetry, it means the dead. Isaiah 14 has the Rephaim stirring in the underworld to meet a fallen king. Job and the Psalms put them under the waters, among the departed. Same 3 consonants. A giant clan in the conquest books, and the shades of the dead in the poems. Whether the 2 senses are related, nobody has established, and the argument has not moved in 100 years of trying. But notice which way it leans. If the word for these people is also the word for the departed, then the conquest narratives are naming a population everybody already thought of as finished. Ghosts of a nation, not a nation of monsters. So the modest answer is a real answer, tall human nations, remembered in a vocabulary of monsters. The second answer comes from outside your Bible, and it is the largest claim anything in this material makes. It does not deal in bodies at all. The Book of Enoch, chapters 15 and 16. Charles put this into English in 1917, and his wording is what I read from. For anybody going further than a translation, the scholarly standard is the Hermeneia translation and commentary by George Nicholsberg and James Vanderkam. The setting is a strange one. Enoch is a man, and he has been sent back down carrying a verdict to angels. The watchers asked him to petition on their behalf. He has been told there is no petition, and in the middle of the refusal, the text stops to explain what their children actually are. And now, the giants, who are produced from the spirits and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. The chapter keeps going, and it turns clinical. The spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst. Then chapter 16 puts a date on it. From the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, from the souls of whose flesh the spirits, having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment. Read that against the question this episode opened with. The flood killed the bodies. That is what a flood does, and Enoch does not dispute it for a second. Nothing in that book claims anything large paddled its way through. What it claims is that a hybrid does not die the way an animal dies. The flesh half drowns. The other half goes out of it and stays here, because in this cosmology there is nowhere else to send it. That is not a loophole somebody found in Genesis later. It is the whole point of the chapter, and the chapter is older than the New Testament. Jubilees follows it through to the paperwork. Chapter 10, After the Water. Noah's grandchildren are being led astray by these spirits, and Noah prays for them to be shut away. The order is given, and then Mastema, the chief of them, asks for a portion to be left him, and 1/10 are left, and 9 parts in 10 are bound. Somebody sat down and wrote out a 90% solution to the problem of the dead giants. That is either theology or accountancy, and I have never been able to decide which. And this is where the whole thing arrives, in a place you already know, without knowing why. Open a gospel. First-century Judea is full of unclean spirits. They speak, they are named, sometimes, they are cast out on nearly every page, and not one writer stops to tell you what they are or where they came from. Nobody explains a thing their readers already have a word for. They did have a word for it, and this is where the word was coming from. Aramaic. Copies of these very chapters were circulating in that country in that century, and pieces of them came up out of the caves at Qumran. Archie Wright wrote a book following that line, The Origin of Evil Spirits. Nicholsberg and Vanderkam treat these 2 chapters as the place the whole category gets built. I am not going to tell you the gospel writers had Enoch open in front of them, because nobody knows that. What can be said is that the demonology sitting under the New Testament has an origin story available to it, and this is the one the surviving Jewish books of the period actually tell. Tell me in the comments what you think those 10 men saw at Hebron. Not which theory you prefer. What was standing in front of them on the day, because that report has been read for 3,000 years, and nobody has ever had to describe it. And if it is the giants themselves you are after, the book that got left out of every canon and came back up in fragments from those same caves, with Gilgamesh named inside it, has a whole episode of its own on this shelf. One last thing, and it is the question I cannot close. Did anything come through the water? Here is where I come down, and it is not the exciting answer. Nothing in the Hebrew Bible says a body did. That is an argument from silence, and I will call it one. But every giant in that book after the flood arrives with a nation, a territory, and a burial attached, and the same book that reports them reports their end. What came through, in the record we can actually hold, is a word. Nephilim went into the water, and it came back out, attached to a walled town in the Judean hills, and it was still doing work 500 years later on a battlefield in the Elah Valley. And the only text that claims more than a word survived does not claim bodies either. It claims the other half, which is a stranger answer than the one everybody argues about, and a much harder one to drown. The verse is in Numbers 13, and the report it belongs to is still called an evil report, 4 lines earlier. The 4 words are in Genesis 6, in the 4th verse, in 3 manuscript traditions that agree about very little else. The bed is not in Rabbah. Nobody has found it, and the man who wrote the sentence expected somebody to. The dolmens are on the Golan, thousands of them, basalt slabs the size of doors, standing in the country Deuteronomy hands to Og. Nobody can tell you who put them there, and geography is not identification, and they are still standing. Gath is a mound in Israel called Tel Es-Safi, and there are people out on it with trowels. And the spirits have never once been accounted for. They are in a book Jude quotes by name, and no Bible on your shelf contains it.